This video is proudly sponsored by War Thunder, more on them later. Disorientated, lost in thick cloud, engine sputtering and struggling, one gun jammed, another still operational. Holding on, still in the fight, but barely. And then, a group of dim shapes form out of the mist to the right. As they draw closer, they become more distinct. Enemy fighters, 10 of them, and only one of you. They've spotted you, and there's no escape. It's time to fight like you've never fought before, and maybe, just maybe, you might live to fight another day. This was a reality for thousands of fighter pilots who flew during the Second World War. In every case, the loneliness, the fear, the isolation must have been enormous, and all of those airmen, from the USA to Japan, showed tremendous bravery every time they got behind the controls. But then there are the extreme examples, the fighter pilots who took on far more than their fair share of the action and lived to tell the tale. This is our subject for today, as we look at 6 pilots who defied death and did the impossible. Let's get right into it. And if you want to fly the same iconic planes these pilots flew, look no further than War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. Step into the role of commander with access to an extensive arsenal of over 2,500 tanks, aircraft, helicopters, and naval vessels from 10 leading countries. Your resources span nearly a century of military technology, starting with the early biplanes and armored vehicles of the 1920s, through to the cutting-edge fighter jets and advanced main battle tanks of the modern era, where the sounds of battle are as true to life as it gets, and the graphics are so sharp, you'll feel like you're in the driver's seat of history's most epic machinery. And let me tell you, the level of detail blew our minds. Each vehicle isn't just a model, it's a fully realized piece of machinery with authentic damage models. Get hit and you'll know exactly what went wrong, from a punctured engine to a taken out crew member. Thanks to an in-house engine, War Thunder offers a seamless experience with stunning graphics and smooth performance, even on less powerful rigs. And let's not forget the massive global community. Join over 70 million players in epic PvP battles in a game that offers a breathtaking experience. Unparalleled in its depth of high quality content, especially for enthusiasts of military history like us. Sign up for my link below, and for a limited time only, new or returning players who haven't played in the past 6 months get a colossal bonus pack. We're talking multiple premium vehicles, an exclusive vehicle decorator, the Eagle of Valor, a whopping 100,000 Silver Lions, and a whole week of premium account access. So what are you waiting for? Play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. Claim your bonus, and I'll see you on the battlefield. We can't make a list like this and not include Douglas Bader. However, Bader could very easily have not been involved in the Second World War at all. Coming from a military family, the 18-year-old Bader joined up with the RAF as an officer cadet in 1928 and took to flying rather well. He gained his commission in 1930 and showed himself to be a skillful pilot, although perhaps a little overconfident. This overconfidence would come back to haunt him when, in 1931, still only 21 years old, Bader attempted an aerobatic maneuver and miscalculated horribly. The resulting crash left Bader with sickening injuries, and both the young officer's legs had to be amputated. Learning to walk again on artificial limbs wasn't enough for Bader. He wanted to fly again. By 1933, the Central Flying School reported that the young man, remember he was still only in his early 20s at this point, was indeed a capable flyer. It wasn't enough though. His disability meant the RAF could not recertify him, and Bader spent most of the 30s thinking about what might have been. In 1939 though, everything changed. Britain no longer had the luxury of turning away skilled pilots, and by November, Bader was back and flying in the Battle of France. A squadron leader during the Battle of Britain, Bader and his 242 squadron comrades shot down 67 enemy aircraft, losing 6 pilots in the process. Reports vary as to the events of August 8, 1941. What's certain is this: Bader, who had left the 242 squadron in March and was now heading his own fighter wing, took off from Tangma to take part in a daylight raid with Squadron 616, accompanying a detachment of bombers. By now, he'd achieved 20 confirmed victories, plus another 2 shared with other pilots. His winning streak would continue on August 8th, as he claimed another ME-109F. However, as his logbook would record, His good fortune ran out on that day and he collided with another German plane. This is where reports differ. More recent investigations say it was friendly fire that struck Beta. In whichever case, the outcome was the same. His Spitfire was shattered and the hero was going down. The parachute canopy opened above him and Beta drifted down toward the French countryside. There was something missing. Beta's right artificial limb had become detached. The wing commander was parachuting into enemy territory with just a single leg. As he would wryly recall later on, the leg, my Spitfire, and I had all parted company. The landing knocked Beta out, and he awoke to discover 2 German soldiers removing the harness and parachute. They took him to the hospital at nearby Saint-Omer, and even went to the trouble of recovering his leg from the shattered carcass of the Spitfire. Once his leg was repaired, Beta was up and about again, and he made his first attempt at escape. Slithering down a rope made from bed sheets, Beta made a run for it, but he was captured quickly and sent off to Oflag 6B in Warburg. Beta was moved to Stallagluft 3 and then to Stallagluft 8B. Here, he attempted another escape with 4 other comrades but was once again arrested. This time, he was sent to Colditz Castle. There would be no escape from Colditz, but Beta would make a nuisance of himself for the remainder of the war, and when the camp was liberated in April 1945, the guards were probably quite pleased to see him go. A larger-than-life persona with a remarkable story, Douglas Beta has rightly become ingrained into Britain's psyche. He spent the rest of his life working to improve the lives of those with disabilities, was knighted in 1976, and died in 1982, aged 72. Franz von Werra was born a Swiss baron in 1914 in the stately Castle Leoch in the canton of Wallis. And yet, his upbringing in his first years was sparse. His parents, racked by poverty, gave Franz and his sister up for adoption, but his German adoptive parents could not provide for the children either. The young Franz, keen to make his way in the world, joined the Air Force, training at Potsdam before flying as part of the Alp Squadron, and then joining the staff squadron of the 2nd Fighter Wing under Günther Lützlow. Von Werra loved flying and the swashbuckling idea of being a fighter ace. 1940 found him flying bomber escort missions over southern England with a reported 9 victories to his name, which earned him the Iron Cross First Class. But in September of that year, he would find himself in a brutal dogfight over Croydon, South London. Taking down one of the Spitfires, von Werra decided to make a run for it. He'd made it as far as Maidstone, Kent, within sight of the coast, when he came down and was taken prisoner. Imprisoned at Grisdale Hall, von Werra wasted no time in escaping, but his October bid for freedom resulted in recapture and solitary confinement. Months later, on December 17th, he'd have another chance, but once again he was captured and this time shipped off to Canada. As the train trundled toward the prison camp on the northern shore of Lake Superior, Ontario, von Werra suddenly realized how close he was to the still neutral United States and freedom. Von Werra decided to leap from the train and make a run for it, but the frigid January temperatures had fused the doors and windows shut. Gathering together a group of fellow prisoners, von Werra and his companions used the heat of their own bodies to thaw the frozen joints. After a nervy moment, when the train was inspected just beyond Montreal, von Werra knew the time was now. He leaped from the window near Smith Falls, 30 miles from the border. He had the jump on his captors. No one had even noticed he was gone until the following afternoon. But between him and the United States lay the St. Lawrence River. Crossing the frozen river, he made his way across the ice. Von Werra eventually made his way to Ogdensburg, New York, making it to the United States, becoming only the 3rd German POW to do so. But his journey was not yet over. After heading himself into the American police, von Werra began to fear they might just hand him back to the Canadians. Working with the German consul, he was helped to the Mexican border, where once again he escaped, eventually reaching Rio de Janeiro and flying to Barcelona in neutral Spain. While British and Canadian authorities negotiated with the USA for von Werra's return to captivity, the Oberleutnant was already back in Berlin. Von Werra's remarkable life would come to an end just a few months later, however. In October 1941, his new Me-109F4 plane suffered engine trouble and came down over the sea between the Netherlands and England. His body was never found. Nikolai Gulayev was the perfect hero for the Communist Soviet Union and the Red Air Force. From a humble beginning in Aksai near Rostov, Gulayev was a factory worker and part-time flyer. His aviation prowess saw him join the military in 1938, and as the German juggernaut set its sights on the USSR, Gulayev found himself preparing for action. He didn't finish his training until late 1940 and did not start flying combat missions until the following summer. Gulayev made for lost time, however, scoring his first victory on August 3rd in an unauthorized sortie. Reprimanded for going against orders, but praised for his remarkable bravery and skill, Gulayev was well on his way to becoming the USSR's rebellious new star in the air. By January 1943, Gulayev was deputy commander of the 27th Fighter Aviation Regiment, later named as the 129th Guards Fighter Aviation Regiment. Throughout 1943, the 25-year-old excelled in combat, engaging the enemy as ground troops struggled with their foes on the battlefields of Kursk, Dnipro, Kirovograd, and Korsun-Shevchenko below. In May, after exhausting his ammunition in a dogfight, Gulayev rammed an enemy Junkers Ju-87 out of the sky, shattering his own aircraft in the process and coming down near an Allied position. On a single day in July, his formation of just 4 fighters engaged a force of more than 100 and brought down a total of 16 enemy aircraft in an astonishing display of personal courage and exceptional flying ability. The rising talent was becoming a fully fledged legend, and he was awarded a Hero of the Soviet Union Gold Star in September. Gulayev developed a reputation as an excellent marksman, often taking down numerous aircraft in a single day. In one sortie in 1944, he personally brought down 5 enemy planes in about 4 minutes. On 3 other occasions across the year, he scored 4 victories in a single day of fighting. All in all, he ran 200 sorties throughout the war, shooting down 55 planes and taking part in 5 shared victories across 69 engagements. Some reports put his individual victory tally as high as 57. He may not have been the most prolific Soviet ace. That accolade would either go to Grigory Lechakov or Ivan Kozhedov, depending on the report, but his victory ratio was among the best across all the Allied air forces. Gulayev's final sortie ended when he crash-landed at his home airfield in spring 1944. He would not return to combat before the end of the war. Gulayev served the Soviet Air Force for decades after the war, retiring in 1979 at the rank of Colonel General. He would die in 1985, aged 67, and remains a hero in his hometown of Aksai, where a statue and plaque commemorate a remarkable life and a stellar career. Tetsuzō Iwamoto was not interested in the life his parents laid out for him. Set for a career in agriculture, the smart and physically capable Iwamoto rebelled, joining the military and embarking on a new adventure. After initially serving as an aeroplane mechanic aboard Ryōjō, he soon desired to take to the skies in one of the aircraft he was working on. By 1938, he was flying his first mission over Nanchang in Shaanxi province of central China in a Mitsubishi A5M. Young and inexperienced, Iwamoto took on the Chinese I-15 and I-16 fighters that engaged him, shooting down 4 and possibly a 5th. By September, he had 14 victories to his name and was the highest scoring Japanese ace of the Chinese campaigns. Iwamoto would later be reassigned to the Zoikaku and get to fly the state-of-the-art A6M0. When the Pearl Harbor attack brought the United States into the Second World War in 1941, Iwamoto was present, albeit in a supporting role, flying cover over the carrier group. Now a petty officer first class, he saw significant action at the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, and his unit suffered such heavy losses that they were ordered back to Japan for resupply. A catastrophe at Midway the following month forced the Japanese hand. A talent like Iwamoto was too good to go to waste, and he was tasked with training up a new generation of pilots to take on the Americans. But even this wasn't enough. The war was going badly and Japan needed their best men in the field, not simply in the classroom. From November 1943, Iwamoto was back at the front, flying missions with the 253rd Air Group out of Rabaul. With resources stretched to an unbelievable degree, Iwamoto and his comrades were sent out on sorties on a daily basis. The pressure would be enough to crush a normal man, but Iwamoto thrived. In just over 6 months of fighting, Iwamoto claimed an astonishing 142 victories. As Japan's territory across the Pacific slipped away, Iwamoto was back in the skies in autumn 1944, battling enemy planes over Taiwan and the Philippines. Now an ensign in the Imperial Navy, the pilot must have felt a grim realization of what was to come as his assignments grew ever more defensive. He flew with the 203rd Air Group, defending Okinawa and then Kyushu, before acting as an instructor for the forlorn ranks of kamikaze pilots groomed to die in a desperate defense of their homeland. Iwamoto scored 202 confirmed kills in the Pacific campaigns, an incredible number that makes him Japan's top flying ace of the war. And yet, Iwamoto's end was a sad and ignominious one. Japanese perception of its war hero shifted startlingly in the years following their defeat. Few people wanted to remember those final days of the empire, and even fewer wanted to celebrate the men who had fought for it. The ace struggled with alcoholism and depression, as well as pain from the wounds he'd suffered during the war. In 1955, he succumbed to septicemia after a series of operations and died aged only 38. "When I get well," he reportedly said to his wife as life ebbed away from him, "I want to fly again." Saburō Sakai didn't make too many mistakes. His style was one of precision and cunning, an aerial chess game of lead and aluminium. But in August 1942, he made a big one. On a bomber escort mission over Guadalcanal, Sakai had already downed 2 planes when he saw a formation of 8 Grumman Wildcats in the far distance. The Japanese ace couldn't let an opportunity like this go to waste, and he went in the attack. But he was mistaken. By the time Sakai knew his predicament, it was too late. Instead of single-seater Wildcats, Sakai's prey were Grumman Avengers, torpedo bombers with rear-facing machine gunners on board. As Sakai recalled, it was a trap. The enemy planes were not fighters, but bombers, the new Avenger torpedo planes, types I had never seen before. From the rear, they looked exactly like Wildcats, but now their extra size was visible, as were the top turret with its single gun and the belly turret with another 50 caliber gun. A hail of bullets ripped through Sakai's Zero. Plane and pilot, man and machine were savaged by the onslaught. Sakai, somehow still alive, turned and headed back to his base at Rabaul. How he made this remarkable escape is anyone's guess. He probably wasn't sure himself. He'd been shot in the face, sustaining horrific wounds. The account of his flight back in his autobiography, Samurai, is harrowing, including passing out multiple times only to wake up flying inverted and using what little strength he had left to right his aircraft. He would spend months in hospital after this and would be blinded in the right eye. It may come as little surprise that Sakai descended from the samurai warriors of feudal Japan. Born in 1916, the future pilot was raised in the Bushido Code of Honor, Sacrifice, Bravery, and Stoicism. He enlisted at the Navy at age 16 and underwent brutal treatment in the training camp at Sasebo Naval Base. "I remember sometimes passing out from the beatings," he would later recall. "We were to suffer in silence." The ethics of such treatment are questionable at best, but Sakai would credit his toughness and resilience to his experiences at the camp. It also made him an unwavering servant of Japan. When war with the United States erupted in a bloody fury at Pearl Harbor in 1941, Sakai was part of the next wave of the assaults of American positions in the Pacific, hitting Clark Airfield in the Philippines only hours after the surprise attack. Over the next year and a half, the Japanese Air Force ran riot across the Pacific, knocking out much of the Allies' own aerial material. Serving with the Tainan Squadron, Sakai and his comrades were responsible for destroying more planes than any other Japanese unit. By July 1942, a month before his horrific wounding at Guadalcanal, Sakai himself had at least 50 victories to his name. Sakai would return to the skies in 1943, battling on despite his disability and the trauma of experience, and by the end of the war, he had claimed 64 victories. He lived a long life, surviving to see another millennium, and it was said he followed the pacifist teachings of Buddhism once the war was over. He would maintain a relatively high profile, co-authoring his biography Samurai in 1957 and regaling interviewers with his wartime escapades. Sakai died in 2000, aged 84. The story of James Howard is a little different to that of some of the other American fighter aces who flew during the war. It doesn't begin in California or Massachusetts, Texas, but instead in Canton, southeast China, where Howard's family lived when he was born. Nor does his record of wartime service begin with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Howard had been stationed at Pearl Harbor, but by the middle of 1941, he was eager to support the country of his birth in their fight against the Japanese. In June of that year, 6 months before the USA entered the war, Howard resigned from the Navy, joining up with the Flying Tiger Volunteers based out of Rangoon, Burma, now Yangon, Myanmar, and then Kunming in China's southwest. Howard flew 56 missions and shot down 6 enemy planes. By the summer of 1942, the USAF was desperately in need of experienced pilots, and so James Howard returned to the United States, where he was commissioned as captain. Flying missions from his base in England, Howard was promoted to major with the 356th Fighter Squadron. On January 11, 1944, Howard was leading 3 squadrons escorting bombers on their way to Oskarsleben when they encountered trouble. Leaving 2 squadrons behind to protect the bombers in the middle and at the rear, Howard and his own squadron moved up to defend the planes at the head of the formation, but confusion reigned. Howard and his wingmen lost contact with their squadron mates and then with each other. Howard, flying alone, barreled straight into a detachment of 30 German fighter planes, peppering the B-17s with fire. Alone and with the odds stacked against him, Howard's sense of duty took over. He engaged, battling the fighters in a desperate attempt to keep the bombers in the air. One after the other, his guns failed until only a single 50 caliber machine gun was operational, and still he fought on. Howard lived to tell the tale, and thanks to his actions, so did many members of those bomber crews. The leader of the bomber formation was awestruck by what he witnessed. It was a case of one lone American against what seemed to be the entire Luftwaffe, he said. He was all over the wing, across and around it. They can't give that boy a big enough award. Howard may have felt impelled by duty on that day, but few would argue that he went above and beyond. Such acts of individual heroism, so often lost in the unfolding narrative of victory and defeat, save lives, rescue beleaguered operations, and offer enormous contributions to the war effort as a whole. Cut off from his comrades, Howard could have opted to save his own skin, and no one would have judged him for doing so. Instead, he stayed and fought, and he performed with such skill and tenacity that he was awarded the Medal of Honor. His skill, courage, and intrepidity on this occasion, reads Howard's Medal of Honor citation, set an example of heroism which will be an inspiration to the US Armed Forces. Howard would be the only fighter in the European theater to earn the United States' highest award for valor. James Howard died in Florida in 1995, aged 81. There's a certain glamour to the role of fighter pilot. In the First World War, when aviation was in its infancy and planes had become fashionable playthings for the aristocracy in nations like Britain and Germany, flying was an upper-class game. By the second, the world had changed. In the UK, pilots were far more likely to be lower middle class than upper class. In Russia, the idea of class was supposed to have been eradicated altogether. And yet, the idea of fighter pilots as knights of the air remained to an extent. The individual, dramatic, and in some cases highly visible aspects of their escapades turned fighter pilots into superstars. Operating in state-of-the-art machines, taking on enemy counterparts in one-to-one combat like the battlefield champions of old, it's easy to see why these soldiers have captured the imagination both during and after the war. All fighter pilots showed individual bravery. They couldn't do the job if they didn't. However, some went over and above what was expected of them. Some of these exceptional cases survived the war, including 5 of the 6 we have looked at today, but many didn't. As technology shifted and as planes grew ever more sophisticated, aerial combat would change forever. There are still heroes up in the skies, but their stories are very different to those of the Second World War airmen. But what do you think? Which of these 6 is the most remarkable? Is there anyone you think we've missed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new. Big thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Remember, you can join the action for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. Are you new or returning after 6 months? Well, for a limited time, you're in for a treat. A hefty bonus pack awaits you, stacked with several premium vehicles, a stash of in-game currency, and more. Just click the links in the description below.